First, let me say welcome to all of you. Just by way of introduction, I'm Susan Vitale. I'm our Chief Marketing Officer at iCIMS. Thrilled to be with you here today. I got to be honest, this is the first HR Tech I haven't been at in 15 consecutive years physically. So I'm glad we're able to try and make it work. I don't miss the hangovers, I'll be honest, unless tonight everyone wants to just pretend we're back in Vegas. But I do miss seeing everyone. So for those of you who you're letting us see, thank you so much. And I think in taking a look at our list of those who are joining us today, we have a lot of our partners from iCIMS, some iCIMS customers. Thank you for your partnership and for your business, even some former iCIMS colleagues. So shout out to the former iCIMS colleagues who want to see what we're up to and participate today. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we'll go through just a little bit of housekeeping and we'll go through introductions of my esteemed colleagues, William and Joe, in just a moment too. We do have some slides just to help facilitate here, but this really is designed to be a conversation, a virtual roundtable. I don't think anyone has nailed exactly how to do a virtual roundtable in the right mix of intimate and lots of people and lots of voices. So it's probably going to be a little bit bumpy, but we'll do our best. Thanks for bearing with us. My colleague Carly will be helping to guide us through here as well. So let's jump in. 2020 has undoubtedly been wild, to say the least, for everyone, and whatever flavor that is for you. And it could just be as wild as working from home. I think the universe knew I was going to be hosting a roundtable today, so there's a massive tree being cut down across the street and grinding of that right now, just to be just the right amount of distracting for today. And I'm sure all of us have had probably 800 of those moments over the last 8 months when you're presenting in an important meeting or at a board call or something. Universe always knows when to make that happen. So apologies for there, but it seems right. Just like, yeah, that's how this has been going for everyone. But on a more serious note, as we think about some of these transformations beyond just, loud landscaping, I'm sure as HR leaders, all of you have been going through a lot this year. And that might mean layoffs for your business. It might mean new business models, new locations, or virtual locations, and figuring out how to do everything virtually. It could be furloughs. And so I think undoubtedly HR leaders in every industry, every location, every company size have risen to the challenge. And if people are still thinking HR is simply administrative or tactical, they have not seen what HR leaders can do. This year has truly proven that in my mind. And so I think while we've acknowledged that COVID has accelerated a lot of this change for a lot of us, I think it's also an opportunity for us to say that this is our moment. HR's moment is now, hence the title of this session here. And I think it's because we all know that with the right people on the right team, amazing things can happen. So let's get into it, shall we? Carly, if you don't mind jumping forward, thank you. I mentioned I'm Susan. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer with iCIMS, been here for 15 years. And I'm joined by two gentlemen I've known for many years. And I'm thrilled to have joined me today, but again, also want to really make clear that this is for everyone to talk, not for us to talk at you. So please, by all design, show us when you want to speak up in any way. The chat is a great way to do that, but we'll take anything. So I'm going to toss over to both Joe and William to introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll get into the content.
Thanks, Susan. It's awesome to be here. I don't have that 15-year streak going, but I definitely do miss Vegas. Agree with you on not missing the hangovers, especially being at home with all the kids and homeschool. So just want to say hi to everyone. I'm Joe Essenfeld. I'm the VP of Strategy at iCIMS. My focus at iCIMS is around strategic partnerships and collaborating on our cross-portfolio roadmap and innovation. I joined iCIMS in June of 2019 after Jibe was acquired. Jibe's a recruitment marketing company that focused on career sites and candidate relationship management. I founded that back in 2009, and we were based in New York and New Jersey, had a great relationship with iCIMS throughout the whole tenure of our company, and just really excited to be here. And I've started this VP strategy role in January of this year, and just love working with the team. So it's good to see everyone. William?
Sure. William Tincup. President of Recruiting Daily, which is kind of a media play, and we do events as well. I've been in the industry for 22 years, studying HR and recruiting and technology, and occasionally I have been opinionated. Occasionally I've been sarcastic, so I'm happy to be here because it's a great topic, and looking forward to the discussion that we have.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Opinionated is great. Preach. So I know we won't necessarily be able to introduce every single person on the call, but maybe even just by a show of hands or chats, how many of you, we can kind of think about this in a few different categories, are either in HR technology, we'll go with that one first, HR broadly, talent acquisition, and then we'll say other. How about that? So HR technology, either hands, chats, HR tech consulting, okay. HR tech, great. HR tech, great. How many of you are in talent acquisition specifically? Not as
Oh,
many.
this
Yeah.
is cool. Thank y'all so much.
Okay, we've got a couple in TA. HR ops, awesome. Great. Okay, so we'll do our best to guide the conversation knowing some of that. And if we skew too far in any of these directions, please help us get back to where it's the most relevant for you and this audience. So maybe we just set the stage here before jumping into some of the questions. And let me be clear, none of this is going to be a commercial, but I am going to plug just iCIMS data at this point because I think it's meaningful data to help set the stage. So for those who aren't that familiar, iCIMS is the talent cloud company, basically HR technology to help you attract, engage, hire, and advance the world's best talent. I say that because we're sitting on some incredible data, hiring trends data across literally 330 million users, 4 million jobs posted a year, covering a workforce of about 30 million. And so we're able to see some really interesting things with our data in terms of application rates by geo, by gender. We're able to see things like hires, and is that going up or down? Job openings, where people are applying versus where they live, et cetera. So we thought it was meaningful just to give a little bit of a set the stage here using our hiring data. And so you'll see 3 different areas here: job applications, job hires, and job openings. Okay, thanks for your business, Shafia, excuse me. And so what we show is Q1, Q2, and Q3. And so that first bar shows where we were on job applications, job hires, and job openings in Q1. And then we basically show, for example, in that first bar left, down 15%, meaning job applications in Q2 were down 15% versus Q1. And in Q3, they were down, or excuse me, in Q3, they were up 23% versus Q1. So that's how you can read the charts you see here. Share that because while sometimes it feels like we are in the midst of all doom and gloom after about 7+ months of us doing whatever it is we're all doing in the midst of a lot of social unrest, complicated political climate, et cetera, there are some silver linings that we can look at and maybe some positive trends coming out of this data that show that applications, hires, job openings are all up versus Q1. So we're seeing things improve. And then when we start even nuancing that, we're seeing some good things as it relates to candidates who self-identify as diverse, either ethnically, racially. They're being hired into more roles over the last couple months. So we're starting to see some positive trends. And so I want us to just think about that as we go into some of these questions, because I know that this certainly varies dramatically based on the segment, the industry, the location you're in, but wanted to set the stage broadly for what we're seeing is that obviously Q2 was really tough for many of us in the job market overall, but we're starting to see things maybe tick up. So Carla, if you don't mind, let's jump into this first question for everyone. And it's essentially, why is HR's moment now? Why should we be leaning into our talent acquisition, our HR tech, and our talent development and management programs even more? And more importantly, how can we as leaders, HR tech professionals, TA professionals and leaders, how can we start rebuilding? Hopefully this isn't just a blip, that we're seeing a couple months of a rebound and things will be getting back to some relative state of normal at some point, right? So how can we all equip ourselves to get ready for this rebound? So I'm going to toss it over first to William and to Joe, and certainly for anyone who wants to chime in, by all means, would love to hear from you. So Tincup, you want to start us off?
Sure. I think one of the things before, as a kind of a preamble, is recognizing that everyone's going through something different. I would say that we're all going through kind of our own version of trauma of 2020. So, and that'll have some kind of lasting effects and ripples. So one of the things that I think is important for all 3 of us is that this isn't preachy and like you should be doing this or you shouldn't be doing that. It's not that. In fact, it's quite the opposite. There can be no guilt or shame if you're in a situation where you can't innovate because you're just trying to tread water, first of all, that's great. You know, don't feel no shame, feel no guilt. You're going through trauma. Your organization's going through trauma. You're going through trauma. We're all going through our own versions of trauma. So with that caveat, and that is a kind of a backstop, so that no one gets off of this or gets away from the round table feeling like I was just shamed. I went to a round table and I was shamed. There's no intent of that. I think the moment is being now is that the organization desperately needs you. It's always needed you. In December of 19, it needed you just as much. But I think it's recognized, organizations have recognized that they need HR and talent acquisition leadership. They need that communication and they need innovation to come from you. And they need it now. They needed it before. Like, let's no mistake. They needed it before. They just didn't know how much they needed it. And now, because so much has been peeled away, um, it's painfully obvious to executives and to the organization itself how much they need HR, how much they need talent acquisition leadership. With that, I'll pass it over to Joe.
Thanks, Tincup. Appreciate that. I think you bring up a really good point about people and how essential we all are to the companies that we're a member of. And what's been really interesting to see across the industry and with the different companies we work with is that HR and talent acquisition has gained a more important role because the people that we all rely on are no longer in front of us. And the glue that we all are in terms of being in HR and either advancing talent in your organization or bringing new talent in has become more valuable and absolutely necessary for our organizations because we no longer have that in-person crutch to rely on. And I think it took that change in workplace where we're now working from anywhere for different business units to understand how important their talent really was, because that engagement in person is no longer there to rely on. And as a result, as a part of an organization, our voice is being heard a lot more, and it's being encouraged to use technology to help us do our jobs better. So digital transformations that have been accelerated due to everything that's going on, almost all of them are about getting our work done more efficiently in a more collaborative way, but not in person. And I think that all falls on our plate as members of the HR community to be able to step up and inform our companies what investments make sense and how we can change the culture of a company to accommodate a much more inclusive and diverse workforce because we're forced to change and adapt the way that we're all working.
So I'm seeing great commentary here that I think aligns frankly well to what both of you said and also to our next question around tech. But obviously this is an HR tech conference, not just an HR conference. So, I'm seeing commentary here around how we can leverage technology to better support some of these initiatives since we are dispersed. I'm seeing things of we need to evaluate tech to see how it can help us control our costs, become more strategic. So for the members of the group who are commenting here, anything you'd like to elaborate on through what you've added on the chat, or maybe tips the other members of the roundtable can share related to your comments or questions?
Sure. Well, let's get kick-started. I think one of the things that I've seen a lot of leaders do is look at kind of the three P's: product, process, and product, process, and people. So the way you collaborate would be the people part of it. And obviously we're collaborating, we're hiring from home now, we're onboarding from home now. And so that part of collaboration is being rethought, and probably a lot of things in March or even in February we didn't think that we could do, we proved to ourselves we could do overnight. Some things better than others, but so the way that we collaborate, it's all fair game. I think every process and micro process in HR and in recruiting is subject to be rethought, and to be kind of imagined, if you will. And then I think that when you look at products and you think of your HR tech stack and you think of all the different technologies that kind of make that, you start really evaluating which ones that you're leaning on a little bit more heavily and maybe which ones are proven to be either redundant or not as needed, or for whatever reason you have to change your HR tech stack. I think it's a wonderful time. It's silver linings, if you will. I think Susan said that. A way of looking at COVID or this whole year, and thinking about those P's and what can we do differently that makes our organization better.
Thank you. And then I noted in the chat that Jeanette, or I'm sorry, I'm not sure if this is a first initial and last name. It's not easy to do this on a virtual roundtable, guys. I got to be honest. But any additional comments or thoughts, or did you want to elaborate on what you had shared on the chat?
This is Jeanette. I think the thing that I was trying to bring focus to is that our organizations in HR, they're needing that tech to assist them in meeting those goals. And I think being able to rely on the tech, really understand what it can do for you, optimizing that tech and getting the most out of it is how you're going to bring value and really help support other initiatives that your organization has.
Jeanette, first of all, that's fantastic. I think one of the ways I've seen people do that is they go back to their vendors, let's say iSIMS, and they ask them how other customers are leveraging their technology. Oftentimes, this is true of Joe's company, previous company, and iSIMS. There's so many features and so many things that you can use that don't get used for some reason. For whatever reason, an admin didn't want to roll it out, or maybe recruiters didn't want to use it, whatever. But I think one of the things that you can do with all of your technology vendors is go back to them and say, how are your most innovative clients using your technology? And it's an easy question to ask, and actually, I'd be honest with you, it's from a technology perspective, it's an easy answer, because they know they know their customers that are really pushing their technology the most. They can easily render some of those stories for you. So one of the things I would suggest is, as you're trying to get more efficiency out of the tools that you've paid for, is go back to the vendors and just say, where else can I innovate? Where else? Who else is using this differently? Who else is using this better than we are, or in a different way than we are? And again, it's fair. And your vendors, they're sitting on tops, as Susan said at the very beginning, they're sitting on top of thousands of deployments of software. So they have insight into all this cool, innovative stuff that's being done. And you'd be surprised at how little they get asked about that innovation.
I think that's a really good point. And many of you may have worked with tech vendors for a long time, and then eventually you go through some sort of optimization of that tech, right? Of, well, 5 years ago, we're a different company now, or maybe our admin or the champion who brought this on is no longer here, or we've gone through a bunch of acquisitions, so the way we've implemented this no longer makes sense. This is an interesting opportunity to essentially have those optimization conversations, regardless of how long you've been on the tech, to say, let's optimize it for a new world that we're all living in, where locations matter in a different way. So rather than look at, I don't know, geos and radius search of where your candidates are applying for, maybe say like, who cares? Let's look at this instead and prioritize some different things, and leveraging the community of customers that all of the vendors have, whether that's a massive scale like the iSIMS customer base, or even some startups who might be able to connect you with envelope pushers that are using their tech. I guess to that end, and maybe this is actually on the next slide, I'd be curious, I'd pose it to the entire group here, anybody who wants to participate, but there are ways you can optimize your existing tech stack, right? Especially as we mentioned for a COVID time, but what tech did you either implement or consider or optimize during this COVID period that you think will remain core when we get back to, again, we'll say some relative state of normal, but it's not necessarily just for COVID and operating in a pandemic in a very virtual way, but something you think like, nope, this is here to stay. It's not a fad. Anybody? Or even Joe too, or others saying like, nope, this thing is not just because of now.
No, I think one of the biggest trends that got accelerated that's going to stay is the concept of all of our employees and coworkers becoming digital natives. I think when we go back to the office, it will not be acceptable to not use the technology that's there to get our work done. And I don't think that changes. I think that's a good thing. I think just having that behavior of being in the office, relying on other channels to get work done, that has been eliminated by this work from anywhere environment. And I don't think we're going to go back. So I think the decisions we make today to make processes more efficient and more easily completed virtually, I think those are going to be investments that are well made and aren't trendy. Now, are there certain work from home gimmicks that I'm sure we're all going to, fall into? Absolutely. But the core systems, the core processes, by making them more collaborative and easy to use and complete, that will stay and only benefit our organizations long term.
Yeah, the ad that I would have there is from the last question, and into this question is also looking at the ecosystems of the technologies that you use. So if you take, again, we'll take iCIMS just because we're here. iCIMS has a massive ecosystem of tools that are integrated and around them that they work with. And these are things that could possibly help you. So as you change and you need new things, I always suggest to look within those ecosystems and just ask, like, we need to assess for safety. So we have a company, and the bid is, and we want to make sure that these folks are safe. Who in your ecosystem assesses for safety? Well, if you ask your ISIMS folks that, they're going to be able to point you in a bunch of different directions. So that's one thing, is just make sure you leverage. I think it's under leveraged pretty much by every HR tech buyer and recruitment tech buyer, is that ecosystem. You're buying iCIMS, let's say, but you're buying iCIMS and an access to, hundreds of companies that are already integrated. You might use some and you might not use some. That's fine, but you have access to them and they're already integrated. The other thing I think that I think that Joe hit on that I like is choice. When it comes to remote work, the air's out of the bottle, right? Indeed, I think it was last week, it might have been 2 weeks ago, they released a report on the most searched term, and it was remote work. And so as we would search in January, we would have searched for, Topeka, architect, whatever. And now we don't do that. That Topeka part's not in there. It's remote work, architect, etc. And so I think that one of the things that I think that we will see with a new normal, or whatever becomes our normal, is choice, is whether or not you choose to work in an office or whether or not you choose to work remotely. I think employees and candidates, I think there's going to be more discussions around choice. And again, some people thrive in a remote work environment, and some people don't. And we still don't know what that is. I mean, we're very so early in it. We don't know. There's no assessments out there that can assess for whether or not you're going to thrive in a remote work environment. And so those are being built, by the way, right now. But we don't know. And also personality-wise, extroverts versus introverts. If I had 3 kids that were under the age, or 3 kids in Pampers, let's say, yeah, I'd open the office already. I'd be at the office. I'd be honest about that. I love my kids, but because my kids are 15 and 11, it's not that difficult. So everyone's situation is a little bit different, and I think that's one of the things that you're going to assess in the future, and even currently, is as offices reopen in whatever way they reopened, it will be hybrid, because now we've proven to ourselves, but more importantly, we've proven to employees and candidates that remote work can work. Whereas in January, it was a big giant question mark.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think we've even seen within our own organization, we've had plenty of people who worked remotely, and we were really crappy at it. I mean, we didn't always have our video on. I mean, now soon after this, some of our remote work staff was saying, I feel more connected than I ever did before, because you all are now finally figuring out how to do this. But we weren't immediately turning on Zoom when we were in a conference room and somebody's in Minneapolis or something like that. And so I think we've gotten a lot better. But even as we think about this choice, and you give an example of like 3 young kids, and I've seen in these chats, like a lot of the things that we think are going to stick, things like mobile apps and using Teams, et cetera. No doubt. If we think about somebody with kids who's on Teams or working and has to go feed their kid or calm down a kid, they literally have to take this and then continue the conversation on the Teams app on their phone, right? And so a year ago, nobody really thought about that as being critical, but I think it's nowadays, like, we're not going to be able to not need that anymore. Everyone's gotten really hooked on doing that. And I know that's where we're placing a lot of investment at iSIMS in particular, of just saying people need to be able to do this work in the flow of their work, regardless of whether it's a hybrid model of in office and remote, or everybody stays remote, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. I do think a new skill that we're all going to have to learn to adapt is balancing relationships with work. Because when the office is open as an option, I don't think a lot of us are going to be required to be there every day. But I do think it's going to be a new skill to understand what that balance is. Are you working from home or working from a different location 2 or 3 days a week and going in 1 or 2? And then how do you prioritize who you see? I think this is going to be this new skill and almost an instinct that we're all going to have to, we're all going to have to develop, because employers are going to be flexible for a period of time, and we're going to have that opportunity to preserve that freedom and show we can be productive and efficient. But it's going to be a dual learning experience for both the employees and the employers to then shape that new path. And the onus is going to be on your teammates and your colleagues to figure out that balance. So I think it'll be a really exciting time as it gets reshaped. And I don't think anything's going to happen quickly. I think it's going to be kind of trends that extend and become, actual patterns and behaviors.
So I think that's actually an interesting segue. Carly, maybe we jump to the next piece here, but we talk a lot about the technologies we use in this chat and in this conversation and in general that center on productivity, right? Like, how do we make sure everybody's productive when they're home so they're not just watching TV all day and we know, they're really working. And maybe it's just because we're in a really fast-paced, high-growth environment within my organization, but I feel like oftentimes it's really easy to over-rotate on the productivity side and less on the balance and the happiness and the well-being side. I don't mean it overly warm and fuzzy of like, let's make sure somebody's getting a foot massage while they're working from home. But as we think about these relationships and going back into the office, while not every relationship is a positive one at work or outside of work, to Joe's point, we're going to have to figure out how to do that again. And seeing people in the office makes a lot of us happy. You like grabbing a cup of coffee or just sort of spitballing ideas in person on a whiteboard or otherwise. Being from Jersey, I'm not going to be overly warm and fuzzy on this, but I will pose the question, maybe I can learn from our friends around the country and world here. Why do you think it's important to maintain this workplace happiness? And are there technologies out there that you've seen or used that you think do a nice job of this that we should continue using, so we're not just looking at the productivity and how we squeeze water from a stone, but we're considering the whole version of a person here? So maybe we riff on this question a little bit around just what tools or tech or initiatives do you think?
So I'll start until someone else chimes in. One of the things that we've probably all noticed and probably have come to appreciate is through this trauma of 2020, we've become more empathetic. Like Susan, you were saying, we probably wouldn't have turned on a video during a call. Now, if you don't turn on a video, it's not as personal. You also find that conversations now, which I hope when things go back to whatever a normal is, I hope that we bring this empathy with us, because it seems like every call starts with, how are you doing? How's your family? How are your kids? Is everything okay? And then every call kind of ends up with, listen, stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask. There's a lot, it's dripping with empathy. Whereas in December, those same calls, they didn't start like that, and they didn't end like that, and we didn't talk like that. So
it would have been weird back then if we ended a call with "wash your hands."
I don't know. Evidently, some people probably needed to have that discussion. I'm shocked at that as well. But I do like the empathy, and again, we'll get to the tools. But the empathy, I like that. I like waving at the end of a Zoom call. I even know that's not necessarily my personality. I like that, and I want to keep that. In terms of tools, before Joe takes over, I I think Zoom for me, we've my organization, we use Monday, Slack, and Zoom, and that's pretty much our dominant communication tools. And so I'm in one of those three talking, with our company pretty much every 30, 45 minutes. And so the Zoom calls we've moved, as Susan said, we moved to all video. Whereas again in December, we would have been on Skype or Zoom or whatever, but we wouldn't have been on video. And I like the fact of seeing people from day to day. Again, it's not perfect, but I like seeing that. I like talking to them and hearing their stories. And one of the other parts of this is, like I was doing a webinar this a couple of weeks ago, and my 11-year-old Van Allis, he comes in. I mean, I've got the lights up and the do not come in sign on my office, and yeah, he just didn't pay attention to that. Came right in, and I'm standing up doing a webinar, right? And he just walks in. I'm like, hey, hey. I'm like, well, come here, introduce yourself to the audience. Took off my headset, let him introduce himself to the hello internet. He did that whole bit. And a year ago, I would have been embarrassed in some ways, or I would have been angry with Van Allis or whatever. But now that's normal. Like Susan was talked about at the very beginning, she's got stuff going on outside of her house. That's life. We had hid that really well from people because we had these perfect lives, and we had we didn't have people doing stuff in our lawn, and no one knew of these things. And now it's okay. And I like that. It's made work and the work that we do more human. That people know that, yeah, there's the dogs are barking, the kids are screaming, whatever, all that stuff. Like, let's not lose that connection as we go back to whatever version of normal is.
Yeah, I think at the risk of generalizing too, I mean, everybody's got something. So it could be elderly parents they're caring for, or a family member. It could be young kids. It could be crazy dogs. Mine is going to go up any moment. It's just a matter of when, not if. But I've been on calls where some of my colleagues literally have children hanging on them on these calls. And you could tell the first couple days where they're just like trying to remove these people. And I have a young daughter myself. She'll be 2 in November. And there are times where you hear, and so you got to pick her up. Like she doesn't get it. And it's just after a point, you just feel relieved that you're just like, yep, I'm not just the CMO of ISIMS. That's one part of who I am in this accordion file of a person. It's just like a bit of a relief for us to finally say, like, there's a lot more going on here. And sometimes it's not rainbows and sunshine either. We got a lot of things going on in our lives. And so while I think it was really stressful probably for people in the beginning, especially with Zoom and so on, for us to try and hide those parts of us, it feels like a weight off, at least for me. And it seems like based on the chat for a number of you as well. I wonder if to that point, I mean, how many of you think...
I think someone was about to chime in.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, Susan, it's Charlie McKnight. I'm at General Motors. And William, like you were talking about, the interruptions and meetings and stuff, those have become, like really common, and nobody thinks anything about it. And it's actually something that our CEO addressed early on, like it's going to happen. That's life. But the one thing that I would say that has really changed is people embracing more use of mobile devices. And like we've really gotten into Teams a lot more this year, but just the number of people that are using it on their mobile devices has really increased as well. But the other thing, kind of going to, workplace happiness and stuff, is leaders and people learning and accepting, like we don't have to be on from 7 to 3 or whatever. If you have a late day, you have a late day. If you need to take 2 hours off in the middle of the day to go do something that you need to do, or even if you're going to take 2 hours off because you need to go for a run because you can't focus or whatever, that's better than having you sit at the computer all day and not be productive because your mind is elsewhere. And so really embracing that flexibility. And there's different mindsets. There's some people that feel that they need to micromanage to make sure that people stay on task and they're doing their job and stuff. But if somebody's not doing their job, it's going to become evident, and they're either going to self-correct or the manager is going to step in, and correct it. And that's what a lot of our leaders have found out. We had some pockets within the company where we embraced remote work before this happened, but there were some areas that just absolutely did not. And those groups that did not have obviously had to change, but they found out that it wasn't as scary. It wasn't as big of a deal as they thought it would be, that there are people who have pulled through and they've gotten the job done. But I would say the biggest thing as far as like maintaining happiness is just kind of treating adults like adults and let them determine when it's important for them to work and when it's not important for them to work. And I'll be honest, there's some days that I'll feel guilty if I log off at 2 p.m, but if I don't have anything else to do, I don't have anything else to do. I'm going to go about my day. But William, the one thing that you had mentioned was about, like what software and things like that. A couple years ago, we implemented the Achievers platform for recognition.
Sure.
And although during the beginning of the pandemic, we did suspend all point awards and things like that, and we've since brought it back. But the use of that has really increased a lot throughout this, because now, when we were all in the building before, it was easy for someone to say like, oh, hey, Charlie, help me out with this, thanks so much. But now everybody's doing it online, because in a lot of cases we're interacting with people that we either didn't interact with before, or now we don't get to have that person-to-person interaction. So the Achievers platform has been great for us in that respect.
That's fantastic. Well, people need praise. Actually, candidates ask about praise in the interview process a lot. And it's not used, or it's not phrased as praise. It's usually phrased as, how are you going to recognize me? How are you going to differentiate me from my peers? And I think it's, first of all, I think, again, the trauma of this year and all the different things that are going on, murder hornets included, I think people need that affirmation. They need people to just, hey, that was great presentation. That was fantastic. What you said, things like that. I think when we talk about workplace happiness, just talking to people, the assurance, like you're talking about achievers and rewards and recognition, but just acknowledging people, like acknowledging, that they're human and that you appreciate them. I think that goes a long way for my happiness, but it also goes a long way for the people I interact with their happiness as well. But you got to ask, you got to talk
Absolutely.
to them. You got to talk.
And the biggest thing with Achievers is that our most senior leaders will go through the system and look at the recognitions that are coming through. And
That's
I can
cool.
tell you that when our CEO, Mary Barra, comments or boosts or likes someone's recognition that they got, it just sends ripples through the system, because it's like, wow, they're actually reading this. So that's the coolest part, is that we know that our leaders are looking at what we do.
I love it.
Hey, well, I am so appreciative as we talk about appreciation. I'm sincerely appreciative that you all participate in this. I didn't know what to expect, or if I'd just be talking to Joe and William here. So thank you all so much for joining us and chatting in and chiming in. We really do appreciate it. It sounds like this conversation could go on for another hour, if not more. Which is great. So let us look at this as the first step of a continued dialogue. And to that end, ISIMS is actually hosting our own virtual conference. It takes place in the middle of November. It's free. You'll see a slide up here. For those of you who are fans of, if you're friends with too, cool. If you're fans of Trevor Noah and Mindy Kaling, they're actually our keynotes. And we also have a host of incredible speakers, HR tech practitioners, industry leaders, Moira Forbes, Cynthia Marshall, just awesome people. So you can see it right here. You could also just jump directly to our corporate site, isims.com. You'll see it on this homepage rotator to register for free. We'd love to have you for all of it or some of it, where we'll talk about this topic and a whole heck of a lot more, as well as even talk about Microsoft Teams and the work we're doing there. I have to plug that since it came up as an app a couple times. Thank you so much, William, Joe, for all of you who participated today, and of course, our fearless driver here, Carly. Thank you, Carly. It was lovely getting to know many of you today. Please do keep in touch. You can also connect with us on LinkedIn or on Twitter if you want to keep the dialogue going there too.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.
Stay safe and wash your hands. Right, Tincup?
Be empathetic.
Wear a mask, please.
Yes, please wear a mask. Oh, and Maggie said if you want some free stuff from iSIMS, send her an email. You can see it in the chat. We'd love to send it. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Susan. Joe.